Apologies again, everyone. My ventriloquy is getting a little bit too good, and I've been told to tone it down a little bit for the rest of the stream, especially for this absolutely crucial match that we have coming up now, Gia, between Surrender and Kin. It is absolutely a match, in my opinion, of two of the better players that we have had here in Asia Pacific. Obviously, from Surrender, almost the king of Asia Pacific at the start, despite being ever so slightly dethroned by Glory heading into the later stages, but still been playing very well. And Kin on the other side, despite yet to take a win in round robin, my opinion, he's been playing some pretty good Hearthstone.
I would agree. If I were to fault Kin for anything, it would be maybe for the lineup construction and the bans in the earlier weeks, although he has been banning Warrior more often now, which is the case right here. But it's Surrender who actually deviates, and for a second week in a row is leaving up Warrior to instead ban away Demon Hunter.
And it does, I think, very much revolve around Surrender's strategy of the Highlander Hunter, which we can take a look at in a minute. Obviously, Kin also has the Highlander Hunter, but I think the thinking there for Surrender is that he likes his chances against the Warrior as the Highlander Hunter, a little bit more against the Demon Hunter, which is something I would tend to agree with, given that Highlander Hunter, I think, loses a little bit too hard in the early game, on average, to Demon Hunter. But the really interesting thing for Kin is no Warlock here, as opposed to Surrender, who has no Druid.
That's right. And if we're going to line up just those two X-Factor classes, perhaps Kin has a slight advantage with Druid versus Warlock. Although every time we see that matchup in practice, it seems like the Druid ends up getting stomped. I remember another one where it was actually Tyler versus Possessi last week with the Crazed Netherwings back-to-back. Absolutely backbreaking for Possessi, but we have another shot to see whether the Druid boards can actually get there this time, should we get that matchup. But I'm more excited to see how Warrior actually lines up against Warlock, two of the decks that have been touted as the best deck in the meta this meta.
Yeah, taking a look at Surrender's build of the Quest Warlock, because I think that can make quite a big difference. He is not running the Cartot Defenders, which weirdly enough, I think is something that makes you in a bit of a better position against Warrior. Having the Taunt and the Heal, I feel like can be very annoying to get through. But maybe that's just them playing like a new version of Warrior. Incredibly complicated deck, because the extra 9/9 taunts that you can summon off Abyssal Summoner, I can also imagine being very frustrating.
Indeed, and we are going to get a taste of that matchup right now. Two of the most complex decks and of the most powerful, if you ask the top players and the people at the top of Legend Ladder. And already a pretty premium start for Kin if he wants the Sky Raider and the Corsair Cash, leading for a 1-2-3 curve.
Love both of those cards. The Terran Gorefiend is something that, wow. Okay, a little bit surprised by that. I was going to say Terran Gorefiend isn't something I was expecting him to keep, but it can be a very important card in the matchup, because obviously if you just break it down to its most basic play of Egg into Terran, obviously it can get a lot more complicated than that. That is powerful against Warlock. They do not have good answers to boards filled with Death Rattles, because all of their removal, Dark Skies, Netherwing, Rain of Fire, Twisting Nether, they all leave the Death Rattles behind, which is, I think, probably the big reason behind Kin's thinking here of keeping the Terran Gorefiend.
That's right, the stickiness is very problematic for Warlock, and there aren't that many decks in the current meta that have the second layer, the Death Rattles, whereas you might have seen in greedier metas past that just single layer board sweeps don't quite get there. And maybe that's the reason for Egg Warrior. Another reason for running that as opposed to the non-egg versions, which have also been gaining popularity in 8th pack.
Well, it gets the Sky Raider on one anyway to kind of juice out the curve a little bit. And overall, it's just looking like a pretty good situation for Kin. He is guaranteed, should he want it, the Anchor over the next couple of turns with double Corsair Cash, which can be pretty crucial, not so much in this matchup to gain board, obviously, but I think more just to thin through his deck to guarantee himself the good draws of Battle Rage to keep the card draw going.
That is very correct. And we could talk about health breakpoints over and over in these particular matchups, because Warrior has their combos that deal up to 18 with the or even more, depending on whether you have the coin still available. But the bread and butter one is the 18 with the Horcron, Rage Rampage, or Mercenary.
And I mean, it kind of speaks to, I suppose it's a good demonstrator of how I like to play the matchup. I was almost wondering there if Kim was just supposed to go face and ignore the 2-2, because, I mean, it's not doing that much. And a lot of Surrender's board clears on the Warlock are pretty symmetrical. You know, Dark Skies, Rain of Fire, Netherwing, they target both sides of the board. And you do want to get nice and aggressive, I feel like, in this matchup to at least force your opponent to heal.
Surrender's hand, though, has been looking pretty miserable. None of the tempo cards that he might want, say the Abyssal Summoner in the following turns, not even a Netherwing. The Zephyrus, of course, not active. And 2 of the expensive dragons in hand. No plot twist in sight. I feel like Surrender's first priority then would to be just keep tapping, so he could just dump the Zephyrus here preemptively. But Zephyrus is an X factor in the matchup, where otherwise you don't have weapon removal, you don't have, say, a polymorph to deal with Terran Gorefiend. But I think that would be thinking too far in advance. I am in favor of a Bloodshed Raptor.
Yeah, me too, because, I mean, you bring up a good point about weapon removal, because that's one of the things that the deck feels like it's lacking, unless you hit the Ooze, which Surrender has in his list. But I guess, actually, if you do factor that in, all the things that you want Zephyrus to do, the deck can still do. You can remove all the minions, and you can heal up. And you can also threaten lethal very easily with your burst damage as well. So Zephyrus doesn't do a crucial function. It just adds a little bit of a surplus to your already existing game plan.
And we see a very powerful onto the board from Kin here. There was some consideration of holding onto Coin because, of course, when you have Coin and Grom, you can go for the 24 combo instead of the 18. But I think it is well worth getting this type of board right now. Both the first layer resistant to the Crazed Netherwing, and even if a Dark Skies comes down, he still ends up with some minions on board.
Yeah, Dark Skies does massively mitigate the amount of damage, so I am in favor of just throwing it down here, because a 1-4 on board, unless they start buffing it up with Rampage and copying it and all that nonsense, which is scary, at the moment, it's not that bad at all.
Right. So Kin's swing with the Anchor will draw him his last risky skipper. The Pirate package has been thinned out, as you might expect. No Captain Greenskins available. We could see him go for a decent-sized Battle Rage right now. I think this is a matchup where you're not really looking to save the skipper for big removal, because when Warlock does play minions, they tend to be well out of the health range that a skipper can deal with. It's interesting to think about whether the burst armor could come into play later on, though. But my instinct is that Warrior can draw towards their lethal a lot more quickly than Warlock, so you shouldn't be worrying about your own health total if it comes at the cost of getting to your own game plan.
Absolutely, because, you know, even if you're around this kind of scary health total of like 18, it's only once they introduce 0 mana cards that's even possible for them to deal. Because Malagos is simply too expensive before they get 0 mana cards.
Another top deck Caledon on 6.
Not quite so juicy as the previous one, it's got to be said.
Right. It does do just about as much as a Crazed Netherwing. There's potential for Surrender to coil first to get the draw out and then go for Netherwing. It actually leaves more damage on board is the problem, but
yeah.
It's scary to just leave a skipper unanswered.
I'm wondering, I mean, because the 2 plays that I'm really liking the look of here are the Crazed Netherwing or the Abyssal Summoner. The Abyssal Summoner you don't really want to go for when your opponent has a board, because you want to force them to answer a single minion, which Warrior is very bad at without minions on the board preemptively. But are you actually going to be offered that for the rest of the game? Maybe this is the smallest board that you're ever going to face. And I think Surrender came to the same conclusion.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that there are significant punishes for this, but the punish for the Netherwing of just visible, like you leave more damage on board or the same amount, 3 going face, and then it does not develop a taunt, and Kin can suddenly get most of the initiative back. For Surrender, he'll be very scared of a Blood Boil Brute coming down. Not quite available for Kin right now, but he can gain quite a bit of armor if he likes.
Which is not unimportant. You know, in some of the matchups, like against, I don't know, Priest a lot of the time, or the other very slow matchups, armor is nice, but it doesn't really do too much. Here, however, armor can just give you so much more freedom in your game plan, because as you brought up, you don't need to worry about dying on the backswing.
It's looking to me that Kin might have to face tank this 8 damage.
Or, I mean, he does have a way to not... Oh, no, yeah, because the risky skipper dies.
The way to not face tank it is to rampage the risky skipper.
Yes, yeah.
But I think that is a little bit counterintuitive to what he wants, because it's actually getting to the point where Kin doesn't want all of his board to be damaged repeatedly. He wants it to be durable, and he's still got the second skipper for the other battle rage.
Very nice line from Kin. Like you said, you don't want to be going for a bad play of the rampage there. It's a bit of a devastating blow to use it in the first place only to remove, because that can be one of the best ways to make a board that Warlock struggles to answer.
So again, Kin has built a board that is semi-resistant to Crazed Netherwing. We can see Surrender could go for that and just Mortal Coil off one of the 3/4s, but other Serpent will be available for Kin. Surrender's getting down to a scary health total, but the mana isn't quite there yet. You start worrying about warrior combos around 9 mana.
I like the use of the Soulfire there as well. He's already seeing, I think, that the OTK plan is a very long ways off from worrying about.
Right.
And his hand at the moment was just not very good. You know, Malagos, Aranasi, Kelodan that's inactive, Alexstrasza, way too expensive.
Yeah, the problem will still remain for Surrender, but I think he's getting closer and closer to the meat of the deck. The plot twists is the big one. And if not those, removal at the very least.
Ah yes, the meat of the deck, the plot twizzlers.
It's not the big dragons, those aren't meaty at all. It is plot twists.
Much too lean. Well, clearly the thing I'm looking at most here is just going for some kind of another Battle Rage turn, because there's not an especially good answer to this Crazed Netherwing. So instead, I think I would like to see Kin move towards that OTK plan primarily.
Yes. Picks up a great card to close out the turn with. As you said, even with a buffed up Livewire Lance, there was no way to get through the Netherwing with the mana already spent.
Not buffed up anyway. The other,
right,
it was just naturally drawn, yeah.
The other Corsair Cache is doing nothing now. Always annoying, but Kin's got plenty of draw.
I wonder.
We could see the Kelodan just to remove the Bomb Wrangler without damaging it.
True. It's not ridiculous, actually. It can be very, very annoying, and one of the main ways that you don't necessarily lose on your own, but lose a lot of percentage chance of pulling things back as the Warlock.
I wonder.
If he's not starting with a tap.
Right, because he really needs to start moving towards Plot Twist, obviously, but also Nether Breath here is actually one of the most crucial cards he can find, because that can completely reset his life total. Wow.
Oh, Tempo Moarg. I didn't even consider this.
To be fair, against Warrior, this is as close to a 2/4 as you're going to get in any matchup.
Sure.
There are very few spells that can benefit off the doubling.
It's just enter, right?
Yeah.
And so now for Kin, this is also Surrender going on the as best of aggressive plan as he can, because he's seen both skippers. Now he knows Kin would have to face tank a lot of this damage to actually remove it.
It's smart. I actually like it, I think.
I see where the bombs go. Wow, that is a good bomb. And now the Warmaul can take out the Netherwing. Or the Morg if he likes.
Still do both. It's a little bit awkward because you're tanking a lot of damage on it.
I guess he makes up for it in the armor gained.
Yes, and of course, I think that at this point, the Warmal Challenger is not the cornerstone of his game plan. It is find the second battle, buy the second Inner Rage, buy the second Rampage, and find the one copy of Corkron Elite to close out the game.
Very true. There's also flexibility in maybe if he sticks some minions, just the Grom plus Inner Rage.
Very true.
Surrender is still not drawn into a Nether Breath. This has been a very, very poor Quest Warlock draw.
Rampage now found. We're getting closer.
6 cards left, Eric.
Hench Clan Burls could find some extra burn or card draw in its own right.
Lava
Whoa!
Burst? Inner Demon?
Inner Demon! Hello?
And the
Just
flare is
smash
just
that
cycle.
face.
The flare is just cycle now if he just wants to go for Livewire lands.
These are all insane. Oh.
I mean, they do look very insane, the leftmost cards, because they do damage, but I'm thinking that none of them actually fits within the combos that Kin already wants to do within the same turn.
I think this is the funnest pick, and I also think it might be the best pick, because you have to remember the Corkron Inner Rage Rampage plus Bloodsworn combo is not a true OTK. You're not dealing 30 damage there.
Sure.
It's only, what, 18 that you're doing most of the time, which is a lot, but Warlock can easily heal above that amount, right back up to 30 if they find, finally, a Nether Breath to go alongside it. And if you tack an Inner Demon onto that, all of a sudden, that's 26 damage that you're looking at, which seems a lot more difficult to get out of range of.
It's very true. Especially since with that few cards left in deck, Kin can, I think, reasonably just hope to naturally draw into his original combo given the time. So this is just a way to spend the turn getting his game plan with more insurance is the Inner Demon. But Surrender can heal for a whole lot if he wants. Back up to full.
Can, yeah. So 8 and then 8, yeah. Obviously he's got overheal potentially if he needs it. You're probably looking at saving one of them, I think, just for a bit of extra removal, because Surrender in this instance, when he is almost entirely run out of good cards here, does still need to be afraid of just losing ball.
That's true. But for Kin, this is like a go signal. This is the other Moarg he's seen. Oh, just one Corkron off now. This is the other Moarg use after he deals with this. The healing from Surrender is just the other Nether Breath and the Aranasi Brood Mothers. Not negligible, but with that few cards in hand, it will be difficult.
So with that being, I believe, the first Inner Rage as well, Kin does have some liberty to play around a little bit with the cards in hand, like Bomb Wrangler, Inner Rage, Bloodsworn still leaves up a full combo, even if it delays it slightly.
There's also just Grom Inner Rage and go.
Very true. Very, very true.
A Mishifin?
That's pretty good. I mean, at the very least, it's just a minion to throw down.
Yes. Albatross is very
Albatross
big
is
as well.
insane.
Yeah. Probably not dying anytime soon, but Surrender's had this bad of a draw. Plot twist, not shuffling too much, but you gotta go at this point, right? You don't want any expensive cards in hand.
Yeah, it's just what you're playing first. Nether Breath first is a consideration, for sure, if you're kind of afraid of dying.
Sure.
But as well as the fact that you're cashing it in while you have a Moarg on board, which is, of course, the last one in the deck. But he may just want to go for the plot twist into hopefully drawing Twisting Nether instead and save the Nether Breath.
Yeah, this is a very threatening board in its own right. There's also the consideration that there's still the other Aranasi in the deck, and if he shuffles this Aranasi, there's a decent chance he gets at least 4 healing back.
Great point. But the problem is, of course, if he goes for the shuffle and doesn't clear, all of a sudden he should be very, very afraid of dying.
Yep.
Sadly,
going
the
for full defensive play.
Wow. I do think that playing the Nether Breath now makes sense. You have to be very afraid of just dying and getting it while the Moarg is in play is the perfect time to go for the combo. And next turn, you know, going for a plot twist with few cards in hand means you are less likely to draw the big cards again, so you're more likely to be able to tap into them, I think.
What now?
Man, this is tough from Kin. How to break down the damage. It's also worth noting that the Inner Fire deals 2 right now. I mean, the play that jumps out to me is just a Grom and go. You've seen both Nether Breaths?
Mm-hmm.
And if you double trade, go for 12 to face, that puts Surrender at 15, where Alexstrasza doesn't even heal him.
Yeah.
This play gives Kin board. He's leaving up the board. He's seen both Nether Breath. Okay.
It's just not really anything that it benefits off of left. And Surrender, if he wants it now, is just a questing explorer away from completing his quest.
Without a plot twist played.
Oh, but he gets the Alexstrasza. I mean, you have to just plot twist first
Yeah,
now. Like, you improve your odds of
absolutely.
hitting a big card so drastically.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just the ones we see in hand. It is also twisting Nether, as you mentioned.
Great point. Who's even looking to hit?
I couldn't tell you. I would assume you
Twisting Nether?
twist first, because everything you want to hit outside of
Aranasi?
the Nether.
Yeah. He had no draws for lethal, I don't believe.
Oh, and he gets both Aranasi with the Sense Demon in hand. Sorry, one in hand.
Right, so that will draw the second one from his deck if he needs the healing.
At this point, might as well heal through the taunt instead.
I am left perplexed by that ordering from Surrender. I'd be very
Me
interested
too.
to hear what his reasoning was. Oh! Oh my god. This is Mashiffin now. Feel old yet?
That just seems good.
Seems
Rush.
insane!
Yup.
So one has
Can
Taunt,
push.
the other
5
has Rush. Yep.
And the other bomb can get rid of the Murg. I don't think there's any potential for lethals yet. I mean, Warrior is one of the decks that hardly has created by as its
Right.
win condition, but Ken has just had some insane lackeys this game.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons people like it. It's like a pure deck that doesn't rely on the random effects taking you the win.
Gotta be active.
Yep.
But is it enough? Probably just gonna have to be tap Nether this turn.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at. Okay, it's a good draw.
Yep. Allows him to develop something beyond the Nether.
It's not over here for Surrender. He is able to start using that quest very effectively, and weirdly enough, the extra fatigue that is offered him by the 1/1s is pretty good.
You think this will really go to fatigue?
I mean, I think that Surrender could, if he didn't have the extra albatrosses in his deck, tap himself to taking fatigue damage before the game ended. Potentially.
I disagree with that, because he's out of healing now.
Flaws are your strength.
Okay, fair enough.
And Kin is going far and wide on the board. He knows all the removal pretty much
Yeah.
has been used.
Double Dark Skies, double Moog, the Twisting Nether as well. Everything has come down, so he breaks up the true OTK and instead uses it to try and seize board. This is a fantastic play from Kin.
Yeah. Super clean. And he knows the albatrosses are in the deck, so there's a chance Alexstrasza's turned off, and it is. No chance to get Nozari, no chance to get Netherwing for a clear.
Soulfire keeps him alive, but he has to know that it's not going to work.
Yeah, he has to know.
So there's 2 Albatrice in the deck.
So
And-
many possibilities.
I'm not even sure what the other cards are. They're not game-winning ones, though, I'll tell you that. It's like
Probably
second
a Rain
questing.
of Fire. Yeah.
Yeah, I think second questing. And, yeah, maybe Rain of Fire.
Well, he does the play that keeps him alive from his perspective, but Kin, with very few cards left in deck, has to be quite likely to have additional damage in hand. It is there. And GG.
And this just feels to me, Gia, like classic Kin. I feel like he knew this matchup right from the get-go, because in the card he kept, which I'm still not even necessarily sure I'm convinced of, but at the very least it speaks to a good understanding of the matchup. In the Terran Gorfi, it shows that he understands Warlock's weakness to Death Rattle, and it paid off for him massively there. In the mid-game, he was able to draw removal after removal after removal from Surrender's game plan, which means when the end rolled around, he was just able to make the genius play of going wide on the board instead of going for the true OTK, and it worked out great for him.
It was a chain of genius plays, I have to say. Little things from the ordering of the risky skipper turns, making sure he doesn't overdraw at all because all of the combo pieces are still in his deck at that point. And later on, even leaving up the Moarg after he saw most of the removal being used, and crucially, both of the Nether Breath. Those are things that are not instinctual by any means. That is good recognition of what your opponent can do. And Kin just had the game from every corner on lockdown. Of course, it was pretty fortunate to generate Inner Demon and also the Mishifin, but I feel that even without one of those, he still could have won the matchup pretty handily.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like the Twisting Nether was probably going to be forced out at some point either way. It's just a little bit of a helping hand along the way to get there. But with the Warrior out of the way, we were kind of expecting, I think, the Warrior to get a win at some point, as I'm sure Surrender was. Even though you're leaving it up, it's not like you're saying definitively, Warrior sucks, I can beat it. It's just saying Demon Hunter is that little bit worse for me. And I'm even more afraid of facing that.
Yeah. And that has been Surrender's game plan for 2 weeks now. I have to say, though, I'm still left perplexed, as you are, about the timing of the last plot twist towards the end there, or rather the choice to hold onto it and tap first. Whereas I think even if he plot twisted first and got the Twisting Nether naturally, he still would have had the mana to play it. I'm not entirely sure there, but the Warlock looks like it could be cornered a little bit against Druid and Highlander Hunter.
Yeah, those are two matchups I definitely don't like the look of. The Druid, again, as we've said, despite the win going to the Warlock earlier on in the day for the final match between Possessi and Chonsu, that doesn't feel like the way it usually goes down, because it was a bit of an outlier. I think Chonsu, missed a trick with the early Mount Seller and, of course, discarded the Ysera. But before we're going to get into that, we're going to have another matchup that we've already seen twice today, in fact, Gia, on both sides. The Demon Hunter up against the Druid yet again.
And here we are again with this debate of whether you keep removal as Druid. Time and time again, I'm seeing players go for different routes, and there's justifications you could try and make, like, okay, I can keep removal because I already have one of the great cards in Overgrowth. But when you keep Overgrowth, that's more saying that I'm trying to outlast for a Mount Seller game plan, rather than the Glowfly Blowout, which I think is reasonable still, because especially going first, there's less chances to hit the absolute Glowfly Dream with the coin Innervate.
So you're a fan?
Not gonna say a fan, but I am curious.
See the reasoning. Okay. Nothing incredible quite yet, but I feel like up against Demon Hunter, you have quite a few good top decks here to make use of this Overgrowth. Obviously, Mount Seller is insane, Overflow, even just a Fungal Fortunes, though, or a Glowfly can make it pretty good. It's like a third of his deck at the moment is a good top deck.
The big argument for playing aggressively, I think, is not so much just for the Glowfly Dream, but just Fungal Fortunes on its own leads you to the Dream, because it just replaces itself in the mulligan, gets you more stuff, and there's also the argument of redundancy in Druid removal, but particularly Crystal Power. If you have Fungal Fortunes, that makes the curve super smooth, because you can spend your turn 1 removing Demon Hunter's 1-drop if they have it, and they tend to, and then go for the rest of your game plan. But it happens again that Demon Hunter has a pretty slow draw.
I think I like here from Surrender holding back on the Satyr Overseer. To be honest, it's a pretty good draw. To be honest, I was kind of expecting him to hold back completely and not even go with the Beaming Sidekick. We could have seen the curve. Given that Surrender is expecting, I think here it's safe to say, an Overgrowth to come down, given the turns have been passed, 2 cards were kept, there's been no Fungal Fortunes so far. The Overgrowth is a fairly likely play on turn 4, and then he could have gone Satyr Overseer on 3, coin into the Beaming Sidekick, and then Satyr Overseer Hero Power on 4, sorry, after the Overgrowth comes down. It felt like a fairly clean setup, but this still does leave room for powerful Satyr turns.
Yes, it does. And with the top deck of Twin Slice, that makes Surrender's game plan even more complex because now he doesn't have to coin out hero power to get the minion developed. He could hold on to coin for an earlier Warglaive, say, which is especially enticing because he has the second Satyr. But then, using Slice with the Altruist also seems like you're giving up a potential powerful combo.
But then you have to think, cards are going to come in from the right-hand side, so it's not even guaranteed to be 2 activations. It's very likely only 1.
And so, because of that, I like going for Satyr Twin Slice now. I'm just not sure if it's both of the slices going into this and you save your Beaming Sidekick. The argument, of course, for holding onto a slice is if you get, say, Glaive Bound Adept, but based on the hand that Surrender has now, he's got enough attack charges with a coined Warglaives.
And that's the thing, because I feel like with Altruist, it's either you're getting 1 activation or 0. Like, by holding the second slice there, or the 1 copy of second slice, there's no way you can move one to the right-hand side, whereas if you had the full copy, you would get 1 activation. So I like just going all in here and putting as much pressure on the board as is humanly possible.
And a lot of pressure it is, but Kin diligently held on to all of his removal for this big swing turn, and Yen is going to come down to the Mount Seller.
This is it. This is already, despite it being right at the start of the game, for Kin, his pretty much final hurdle of trying to pull this one back.
Okay, got a taunt here, both of the Overseers removed. Yikes, that beast. We're looking at Warglaives. He can coin hero power as well if he just wants to face tank the Mount Seller twice to get rid of it.
Does preserve as much board as possible.
I like it.
Oh, it's just so annoying that both Overseers died. Imagine how insane it would be if he was summoning a bunch of tutus alongside this.
Still looks fine to me. Surrender is just worried about an overflow off the top, but Kin's got 2 cards. In most situations, Surrender's value can outpace Kin's.
Can Surrender tank another one here on the rabbit? I think he can probably get away with it.
It's not just the 1 damage, I suppose. There's the consideration of that's an Iron Bark target. At the very least.
Whoa!
Oh my gosh!
All of a sudden, we've gone from Disaster Town for Kin to a pretty reasonable board.
Yeah! I mean, not this turn, but he can remove 2 minions and still has this Fungal Fortunes to buff up his Glowfly on the following turn.
But
we're
still
getting to the
far
point.
from over for Surrender on the other side. He's still got powerful plays.
And if he goes Kane now, there's the possibility that Altruist can free up the...
True.
Okay, it happened not quite the way I expected. But there's... The bottom line is Altruist can possibly deal with Glowfly Swarm boards.
I actually really like going for the Kane here because, I mean, the implication is that Kane will die if it's played. I think that's far from a foregone conclusion. We've seen both Bog Beams now, both copies of the Crystal Power as well. It's difficult to clear.
Agreed.
I really like it.
So, this Iron Bark is not doing very much for Kin at all. Oof. Other Mount Seller discarded, but that's the least of his problems. He just can't kill the Kane unless he wants to Savage Roar it.
I mean, you're laughing, but it might be his best chance. I mean, outside of... If he goes for Glowfly Ironbark, is he just dead on board?
He's facing down 10 with
So
the
he's-
hero power,
Right, he's
that's
got
basically
1 health.
dead. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's no other real way around it. He just has to pray that the damage isn't there.
But of course, it is, and
It always
that
is.
will be a loss for Druid, as we often expect in this matchup.
Surrender, double, triple check-in. He's going to see it, though, as he always does. 1 game apiece now. And we're seeing the matchup go more or less where you would expect today. The only time Demon Hunter has taken the L has been with a especially poor draw at the start. And Surrender is able to equalize things. And we're seeing the signature deck for both of these players, with the Warlock for Surrender and the Druid for Kin already starting to struggle at the start.
Yeah, a little bit unexpected, to be honest, but I'm really excited to still see another shot on Warlock. If it means Warlock has to lose so we get to see it more, sure, why not? And with the Demon Hunter taking a win for Surrender, I don't think that is particularly sad for Kin, because as we surmised at the beginning, it seems like Kin could take 2 more wins against that very Warlock.
He could, absolutely, yeah. As we were saying, the Druid still feels like it's in a very good spot, as does the Hunter as well. And so all the while we're staying in this kind of equilibrium where the Druid takes a loss, the Warlock takes a loss, I think in the end it will likely favor Kin on average. Maybe I'm overemphasizing how good the Druid is versus the Quest Warlock. It's far from a disastrous matchup, as we saw early on today with the Warlock taking the win. But in the games that we were playing and testing, at least, it definitely felt like the Druid had the upper hand.
Yeah, and the other question mark here is Highlander Hunter versus Warlock, where I didn't get to test all that much, but it seemed like on paper you would think the Highlander Hunter is favored, also because of that burst that they have towards the end of the game. But it's every time I see Warlock played out, I feel like I'm underestimating how much tempo it can put on board in the mid game itself. After the clear turn, if your opponent has a substandard refill, suddenly you just play your own Abyssal Summoner and you're far ahead.
Well, before we can get to that, we're going to the good old-fashioned Highlander Hunter mirror, a deck that Surrender has sworn by for the past few weeks, although he has definitely changed up his list going into this week's play. He's finally ditched the secrets, despite being a big proponent of them for the last few weeks with the Phase Stalker, the Snake Trap, and the Freezing Trap. Now he's seen the light of the Nagrand Slamgia, and instead gone with a slightly more standard list.
As if he needed Raven to be a bigger fan of him. Now we have the Nagrand Slam. There's also a little bit more of the 2-drop package, of course, to take up the space that Secrets left. We're seeing Injured Tolvir and Felmaw. And also the Trimmed Down Beast package, at least in terms of Phase Stalker. There's an Escape Mana Saber here, which possibly messes with the Scavenger's Ingenuity, especially since he drew 6, or...
Right, so he does still have a pretty
Griffin.
clear curve he could go for of exactly Griffin, which will then draw him Faceless Corruptor. So none of his cards are doing nothing in terms of their extra benefit tacked on.
Correct. Kin with pretty much the ideal turn 2 gets his Felma on the board. Surrender, it's looking like an Animal Companion turn, and outside of Leok, those line up pretty well against the Felma.
To my side.
Well, that one will do nicely. Because if you cast your mind back, Gia, to last week, when we saw Rivius playing this matchup in a very weird way, where he deviated away in a top 5 play from playing out the Zephyrus on curve to instead saving it purely for burst damage, playing it way more aggressively than I thought you generally would play the matchup. And I wonder if Surrender is going to go for the same kind of plan here. I'm already seeing the makings of a potentially very aggressive game plan with Kill Command in hand, a stealthed Mana Saber that can go face as well. He's only a little ways off, I think, from starting to go very aggressively for the win.
I think that Rivius' spot was pretty particular to him having a good grip on the early board. The Mana Saver, at first glance, great, have a stealth minion, but the Felma has a 50-50 of
Fair
just
enough.
yeeting that out of the board, and that is a disaster for Surrender. But the other problem is everything else lines up badly against the Felma, and if he goes for the Diving Griffin, it lines up badly, and not terribly, but not ideally as well, against the Desert Spear. Buffed up to 3 health.
3 health, so it could survive. But instead, Surrender throws his hands together, throws down the Mana Saber.
I can't look. I can't look.
Oh, and he's all right. That is huge. That is absolutely huge.
Enormous that it was not, in fact, yeeted out of the board. For Kin, though, he still has the Desert Spear active and a coin Varana's play for next turn. So that is a very big swing available to him then. Or just go for the tempo right now. I like this.
As aggressive as he can possibly go here. Instead, kind of taking the thing I was applying to Surrender and changing it around. He could go with the reactive Varana's play, which was powerful. But instead, he goes with his own proactive approach. And all of a sudden, Surrender in his own right has a very powerful answer.
Yeah. We could be looking at Zephyrus for Betrayal.
Betrayal, yeah, is what I'm looking at.
That would still leave up 1 Faceless Corruptor. He can go up to 6 mana with this swing, although I'm not sure what he can get at 4 mana that does a better, or a more efficient job, I should say, than Betrayal.
Yeah, the Shadow Flame doesn't quite get the job done.
Even if you do just leave 1 Faceless Corruptor up, I don't mind the look of, extending wide on board, dealing with 2 of the immediate threats. And Kin had already played the Faceless Corruptor, which is the swing card.
The only other consideration I think there was, if you potentially deviate away from Zephyrus, you know, he has got his opponent down to a fairly low life total. We could have seen Diving Griffin plus Kill Command in order to clear the board. Sure. But I guess, you know, if you're doing that, it eats up a Kill Command, which is kind of one of the premium cards you could get off of Zephyrus anyway.
And now for Kin, he off 2 of these minions, crucially the Mana Saber, but he will be falling behind on tempo. Health total is looking bad. And if he wants to use a swing of the Desert Spear, suddenly the Varana Spear combo is no longer available for next turn. There's room to play around maybe with freezing the Mana Saber, for example, so that it can't get the ramp for the next turn. But then you end up taking a pretty ugly trade.
Right, and this presents awkward health totals, I feel like, to Surrender. Unleash the Hounds is the only way to very, very cleanly eat this up.
And perhaps Scale Rider, but there is no dragon in hand for Surrender right now. So I'm looking at the shooter plus Griffin. Sorry, plus Zixor.
There is the potential to go for Zixor, deliberately take a kind of bad trade into the 4-1 and then hope to draw Zixor Prime with the Diving Griffin.
But do you want that this turn? Going into 7 mana? I think he has better draws for the immediate.
Sure. I guess this kind of does the same thing, right? It gets the Zixor down. It likely dies before next turn anyway. And then he can hope to draw it for turn 8. I like it.
Tough choice for Surrender whether he wants to take the VT or cash in the damage immediately.
Oh, I think you're cashing here, right?
Quickly.
But the VT is so awkward for Kin to deal with, right? He's used the Desert Spear. I guess Unleash the Hounds is the punish in Zephyrus.
I guess you're right, yeah. There we go. Another reason to make Raven like Surrender even more. He just goes face.
Seems good. Right, Zixor Prime in the deck for Kin. Not a great top deck. But he had to take the trade. He's rested the board back now. But that is a prime Diving Griffin target if I've ever...
Cool. Nagra and Slam as well means that if Surrender can survive, he's very much looking to outvalue his opponent in the next couple of turns, but he does get the bad news. He won a 50-50 earlier on, and now he's losing a 50-50 by getting the Faceless here instead of Zixor.
Still, this is a very awkward board for Kin in its own right.
True.
This could draw
That's
Kin's own
guaranteed,
Zixor.
I think, right?
Oh my.
Whoa! That turns things around completely on its head.
Yeah. No dragons still for Surrender.
No dragons and no beasts.
How about a mirror?
Oh my gosh. Just Vanilla Hunter? Yeah, I like the deviation. Just going for the board now, but he will get the terrible news. There's gonna be 12 staring back against him after this turn.
I mean, he knew for sure that this was going to happen if he'd tracked it out, given the draw off the diving Griffin. But either way, it still hurts.
A dragon!
Okay, Corrosive Breath, Hero Power, 5 damage, your opponent's down to 7. He could even throw in the kill command to face if he wanted to, just to try and set up Nagran Slam for the win. Those can go face, by the way, on the following turn.
Yeah, I was originally looking at the Drake, but in terms of what Kin could have in hand, there's removal options for days, right? We can see the Siamat right here. There's possibly Varanas, or even just the Freeze. So
Obviously,
the Rotnest Drake is probably not accomplishing as much as you would think.
I think upon thinking about it a little bit more, I'm actually coming around to your thinking, though, of kill command gives him an out for lethal on the next turn with any beast that he finds. There are few left in the deck. It's pretty much just tokens that he can get off of Unleash the Hounds, to be fair, for it left. But it's still potential to just get the win over the next couple of turns.
Yeah, I haven't quite done maths on, say, if Kin has 3 minions, which is a likely outcome for the following turn. How likely is it that Nagran Slam deals 2 to face? Sorry, gets 2 attacks to the face? Probably not that likely. Surrender is praying for a beast. That isn't his own Zixor, actually, because that's too expensive.
That's true.
That's a dragon! It's always the wrong tribe at the wrong instance for surrender.
The problem is that Nagran Slam just lines up really awkwardly as well. There's a good chance he just dies if he plays it.
But Big ol' Whelp, what chance does that give him of surviving? Hardly any. We're putting the faith in the cleft hoofs. Oh no. Ah! Ah!
Oh, okay. That's not terrible. It sets up lethal next turn, and he's not dead.
From what he can see, but a Huffer is GG here.
Oh.
You're shaking his head. Don't do it, Kin. That's what Surrender's saying.
Oh!
Too short.
So close.
And that's game. He'll command hero power face.
Taunt doesn't do it. Varana's Freeze doesn't do it. No way to get lethal. Whoa.
What a mirror, Dark. That was so fun towards the end. Surrender had all of these problems, none of the right tribal minions lining up. And finally, just the clutch cleft hoofs managing to take out Tiamat. Gave him the time to finally send this kill command face. Very different from how we've seen Rivius approach the matchup.
Very true. As again, it's not even like Surrender had to go for the Zephyrus early on. As I said, there were other lines he could have gone for that got the same amount of clear and saved the Zephyrus. Maybe those were better, worth exploring more. But in the end, I think keeping a slightly less aggressive approach on the matchup, but still prioritizing face damage where possible, at not too much expense to his overall game plan, I think is what got Surrender the win.
And of course, a tiny sip of the tea to out the matchup. Did you see that? He took a tiny sip and then wiped off with his wrist as if he took a whole chug of water.
It's just the classic ratio, Gia. The smaller the sip, the bigger the dub. It's just how Surrender rolls in Grandmasters, as he is now 1 win away from taking the series. I believe, actually, if our tiebreaker calculations are correct, that Surrender is already guaranteed to be in the top 6 due to his fairly strong tiebreakers overall. But it would, I believe, if he does lose here, spell absolute doom for Kin, who will be guaranteed in 7th or 8th.
And aside from the absolute doom for Kin, it also spells potential doom for Chonsu, because Chonsu is also relying on Surrender having a good score, because Chonsu did manage to take a win over Surrender. So the people that you defeat in round robin, if they have a better score, that adds up to your own better tiebreaker. So on the other hand, we might see someone like Possessi cheering for Kin here. There's a lot riding on this that's beyond what you see at first glance.
That is correct. And the last deck the Surrender has to take a win with is that Warlock. Whether it's against the Hunter or the Druid remaining for Kin, I think he's got himself a pretty gnarly couple of matchups, to say the least. But up against the Hunter, it is, I think, far from a guaranteed matchup in favor of the Hunter. Obviously, they have many powerful tools in the early game, Gia, but Warlock has a lot of answers to those as well.
Yeah. A lot of the time, I feel that Hunter gets that early snowball very consistently, and Warlock has to get not just one tick of the Moarg Nether Breath. I feel it comes down to having both Nether Breaths or both Moargs for the big swing. Otherwise, I'm not sure if it gets there consistently. But there's also that X factor of the Aranasis, which Hunter, they have a very clear point when they're just ignoring your board and starting to go face, and they can't always account for the additional healing.
Yeah, they just gotta pray it doesn't come down. But already, I would say a respectable hand for Surrender. Dark Skies on its own is just a one-man army, or a multiple Comet army against every aggro deck. There is almost nothing that can survive the early game against that card.
And Kin with the tracking on 2 has a chance to just go Dwarven Sharpshooter to have a play this turn. But losing Varanus is potentially huge to deal with an Abyssal Summoner later on.
That is true. I think given how powerful his early game is, though, he is not all too afraid of that.
Yeah. It's always that bread and butter thinking of if you don't consolidate your early turn, you might not even get a good chance to go for a better play later on. Speaking of good plays, Surrender has this questing adventure off the top. Nice and easy cycle.
Yeah, I like it a lot. If even if your opponent hero powers it down, most of the deck is 3 drops here for the Highlander Hunter, so you're very happy to just accept that hero power.
Ivan Griffin pretty good here for Kin. Easy answer allows him to keep cycling through his deck as well. It's not the highest pressure Hunter start, but it is no slouch.
And it's awkward now for Surrender. It's an annoying enough amount of damage on board to the point where he wants to start clearing it off, but it's not quite worthy of a Dark Skies yet.
Yeah, he has to be wary that going into turn 4, there's a very problematic minion on the horizon, which is Evasive Feywing, which you really want to save Dark Skies for. You can't simply target it with, say, Soulfire or Nether Breath.
In which case, he could go tap here and then Dark Skies next turn. The only alternate line I'm really seeing would be Moarg plus the Mortal Coil in order to immediately clear 2 damage off the board. But I think in this matchup, you've got to know when to take your beatings, and this is one of those spots.
Yes, it is just 3 damage coming back the other way, and Surrender now still hasn't seen a threatening minion. It's that weird point where you feel like this isn't good enough to Dark Skies, but if you don't Dark Skies, you're taking 5 every turn.
Yeah.
There's a weird play available of Rain of Fire, Moarg, double Mortal Coil. Sorry, there's only 1 Mortal Coil.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, Moarg double Rain is also possible, but at that point, you're damaging yourself, you're using a whole bunch of cards, and you want to save the Moarg for Nether Breath once you find it.
Right.
Well.
It is very key to have that healing available. Big ol' Whelp was a great top deck. Kin didn't want to say just waste the battle cries on either of his 5 drops. Are we looking at a Caledon turn?
I'm looking at it potentially. We're also looking at Soulfire Mortal Coil tap as well, just because it...
Okay.
I don't know, you're discarding cards that aren't especially bad at this point in the game.
Very true.
And it keeps the Caledon for a more crucial minion like a Siamat. I mean, there's many options. Also, just Dark Skies is a possibility here if you want to just clear it off and keep the taps rolling without burning too many cards.
Okay. Starting with the tap also allows him more flexibility. Oh, Moarg discarded!
That's a bad one. That is a bad one.
That's the worst one! And Kin sees that, so now is it time to be aggressive.
What does that translate to?
I was gonna say just a Rot Nest, but it looks so terrible with the mana expenditure. Yeah, the 3 and 3 allows him to develop the Desert Spear to pair with Faceless Corruptor potentially next turn.
Yeah. Abyssal Summoner is... I mean, it's such a weird spot, because Surrender obviously doesn't know that the Varanus was tracked over earlier on in the game. Which is the main thing he would be afraid of by going for the Abyssal Summoner. But, I mean, he has to just take a risk at some point here. He can't just clear every turn and expect to get that.
I would argue the main thing he's afraid of is actually Dino Tamer Brand, and this one lines up pretty well against that. Yeah. Whereas if a Varanus just comes down now, we're seeing Surrender take 3 damage to face, at which point he then responds with his Dark Skies. I think this covers the disaster outcomes.
That's a very good point. Speaking of disaster outcomes, Kin could just take the absolute god risk of going for the Rotnest Drake there. But given that he has a pretty good alternative here with the Rush Divine Shield, I'm a fan of this instead.
Feeling comfy enough to just tank 8 as well, rather than sacrifice his Zixor. Love it.
Do we love the trade there instead of going face versus a 2-2? I guess it stops just a Nether Breath on its own from being able to clear the CM, and given that you've seen Moarg already, it's fairly unlikely he'll have the second one to combo with it. So I think it's a fine trade.
Yep. Seems fair to me, and also this still leaves the perfect amount of health for the Dark Skies to deal with. But if a Zixor dies for Kin, it's not too bad. He can just get the Zixor off the top potentially next turn.
I'd take that.
So many possibilities.
It was just a question of whether it was Dark Skies twist then tap, but Surrender is going for maximum draws with the twist, I think.
I think he's going for Ooze.
Oh, for Ooze, okay.
I guess his thinking being that he can just go for Plot Twist at the start of his next turn to hope to hit something good instead. And now the Stormhammer coming down. The turn after the Ooze is thrown down for Surrender.
Yikes.
That feels awful. There is no answer in the deck, aside from Zephyrus, which is inactive at the moment, to clear this off. Just disaster for Surrender.
This Sense Demons is very guaranteed draws the other Aranasi and the other Moarg. So he could play that alongside the Kelidon to remove Rotnest Drake, heals up for 4, and has the other Moarg in hand. But the problem is he hasn't drawn any Nether Breaths, which he wants to get through Plot Twist. So if you already have the Moarg in hand, then you have to play it first twist to guaranteed or give yourself the best shot of getting it with the Nether Breath. It's
So
very
many
complex.
Possibilities.
In the end, though, it does look very good just to get the Aranastis in hand immediately, so that if you twist next turn or this turn, heal it all back up.
Yeah, I mean, the play was there to go coin Moarg Plot Twist and just pray that you hit the Nether Breath because the upside is so huge. But I guess this kind of does a similar thing anyway.
And we are seeing Alex Straza. Aeon Reaver, not bad, removes the Kelidon. Oh, no! Illegal!
I thought they were supposed to have patched that out. Alex Straza can't get Alex Straza, but by 1 degree of separation.
Yes, it can.
This Primordial Explorer is the Hearthstone equivalent of a secret bank account in the Cayman Islands. Like, there is some serious nonsense going on here from Kin getting another Alex Straza.
Dragon laundering.
Yeah.
Crucially, this happens before Surrender has mana to Plot Twist into twisting Nether naturally. I think his quest will be done, so he could tap for it, but it is so unlikely that it is the one right off the top.
And of course, Kelidon is now played, so that can't be found either.
Oh, there's another as well.
I mean, he could twist again and then tap to try and find it if that's his only out, but...
It can't be, right? That sounds terrible.
Yeah. Well, there's the clear.
Doesn't kill the Alexstrasza.
Rain of Fire, Soul Fire,
Oh, okay,
and
okay.
then
yeah.
the... Oh no, wait, but then the 4-1. Oh no, perfectly, okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I thought you were looking at the double crazed. This is definitely the line. But it is a lot of resources expended, not to mention Surrender's taking damage still from his own crazed nether wings. We go again?
How much damage is there here? It's not quite lethal. It
Life
is
and
very
hope
close.
of your fight.
Oh my god. Sally! Are we feeling another frostball? That's another frostball.
Frostball. Let's go. Insane.
If you're Kin here, are you afraid of the only way losing, possibly, is just to get lethal this turn? Say,
That's the out.
right?
I mean, it's not there for Surrender, as we can clearly see, but for all Kin knows, there could be double Nether Breath in hand, and then you tap into the Mally.
Yeah. It was very fringe, though, because he had seen both the Soul Fires.
Yeah.
An inactive Zephyrus, even with only 7 cards left in the deck. Surrender's forced to Nether here, as far as I can see.
Yeah, and then Frostbolt, Zephyrus, GG.
Indeed.
The Kin. Even is all. I think
for Inner Demon, I want to see it.
Oh, please. Please!
Ooh.
Hero Power Fireball, however you want it.
Your wish is my suggestion.
The Quest Warlock has fallen once more.
It has. Surrender, of all players, was not the one I was imagining lowering Quest Warlock's pristine win rate down from, like, I think a 94% or something it was at the start of the weekend. Absolutely insane. But it is looking like it's struggling here. The Hunter taking the win despite the best efforts from Surrender. And now, the matchup that Warlock has actually won so far today up against the Druid, although you and I believe it's not so much of a good one.
Yeah, although the more I see it play out, the more I doubt myself. But honestly, you made the point about Surrender being the person we didn't necessarily expect to have be dragging down Quest Warlock's win rate. And I have to say it was a pretty unfortunate draw for Surrender. They're never hitting the net is a huge deal against Hunter, and having to deal with back-to-back Dragon Queen Alexstrasza is understandably a backbreaker. But now I think the understanding of the matchup versus Druid is very crucial. When to be timing your removal, because maybe the Druid can bait something out by just playing those Rising Winds for Eagles, and then you get blown out by the Glowfly board. It's all about patience from the Warlock, in my opinion.
It is, and of course, always, I feel like moving towards your own win condition as much as possible. There is the chance to fatigue the Druid of all their resources, as we saw in the previous series, with Possessi just running Chonsu out of threats entirely. But given that, taking a look at the lists quickly, it's Ysera that's the really scary thing, and Kin is running it. So as long as Kin doesn't discard the Ysera, I feel like Surrender can't rely entirely on fatiguing, and instead needs to get his own burst win condition online as quick as possible.
Yes, indeed. But I do think the Crazed Netherwing is very, very important to just give you guaranteed insurance against the Glowfly boards. The Ooze is interesting just because it's a minion on curve, but as you said, important to be moving towards your own win conditions, so more spaces to look for plot twists. Sounds good to me.
Yeah, Netherwing's the only thing I was even considering holding on to there. And it makes sense. It's just such a clean answer against the Glowfly Swarm. Even if they throw down an early Power of the Wild on there as well, you're still just able to clean things up. And it's just one card to keep. You're still fairly likely to find the plot twist shortly after.
That's right. Ah, terrible draw for Kin. You can see it
Garbage!
on his expression.
We don't usually see much expression whatsoever from Kin, but this finally got out of him, and Surrender with the plot twist as well.
Oh.
Has a premium hand on the other side.
Okay.
Okay.
Pretty good one. But he's really looking for the fungal. Or even the overflow. Overflow next turn is playable.
True.
And you probably just rip it at that point.
I guess so. Maybe.
Depends. Or
Yeah.
that.
That you do just rip.
Yes. And Surrender has the coin, has the other dragons in hand.
Yeah.
And this tends to be just phase 1 of the matchup. We're entering phase 2.
Yeah, and it's not looking good at all for Kin, it's got to be said, because not only does he not have his own game plan to focus on, he's going to start dying quite quickly, actually. Surrender has Abyssal Summoner in a couple of turns, and Overgrowth off the top helps. But as we can see, Kin's got nothing to go along with it.
The way I see it, his only good draws here are overflows or the minions. If you got the Fungal Fortunes, it can't draw you into the minions. I guess Fungal can get you an overflow, but if we do see Surrender curving out soon, might be that little bit too slow. Won't be this turn, but the summoners, as you said, will be online soon.
And this is a weird old spot for Surrender, because plot twist, obviously you want to play it nice and early in this matchup to get those 0-mana dragons to out-tempo the Druid. But this is a pretty premium hand for this stage of the game, to be honest. He's got the Dark Skies and the Crazed Netherwings to clear if he needs. He's got the, if there's no development, he has the follow-up of the Abyssal Summoner, which is why I think he's looking at deviating away with just a Crazed Netherwing.
That's the one I didn't expect. I thought the deviation would be just tap Zephyrus, but this softens up his own board. And it turns out that's pretty good here, because Kin just doesn't have development for his own. Surrender is being aggressive.
I like it. It's obviously pretty weak to to Exotic Mount Seller, sorry. But to be perfectly honest, everything you do is really weak to Exotic Mount Seller here. There's nothing you can really do that super plays around it. And this says if you don't have it, you're under a lot of pressure, and he's just going to start killing him now with the Abyssal Summoner.
That is wild.
He's just got lethal next turn if this sticks.
Yeah, really does. Both of the Nether Breaths online, dragon in hand, and nothing for Kin. Just air, draw after draw. No Fungal, no Overflow, no Mount Seller, no Ysera. GG.
Oh, Gia, my heart is breaking for Kin. What a way to go out of any chance of getting through to the top 6. Surrender, of course, now absolutely guarantees his spot in the top 6 after a rough couple of games, but I don't even know what to say anymore, Gia. 0-6. And I think he's playing good Hearthstone.
Yeah, I have to agree. It's just, I don't know. I mean, I made the point that maybe in previous weeks the lineups and the bans weren't quite there, but it all seemed to be pretty decently planned out for Kin. He put himself in a position where he ended up with decent matchups in the end of the game. He did go down 1-2, I think, but a decent chance of being able to beat that Warlock. And I especially really enjoyed his Warrior gameplay versus Lock. I think that was pristine. I learned by watching him, and it's sad to see him at the bottom.
It is indeed. Not the end of the road for Kin in Grandmaster, however. Even though he's guaranteed 7th and 8th, those two spots are equal in Division A. You both just start off with 3 chances to take a win in the elimination bracket. So Kin, I think, is still unlikely to be out of Grandmasters, despite being right down at the bottom. And taking a look at the schedule, we can see some of the players who he might be facing in Division B next week in the elimination bracket, because now, Gia, we are moving over to those much scarier matches.
That's right. There is no grace period, no leeway here for the Division B players, because if they end up at 7th and 8th of Division B after the round robin, that's it. No additional bracket. They're not coming back next season. And some of the players that are most scary in those slots would be Frosty, Staz, Samuel Tao, and Dawn. All of them have to win in games to put themselves in the best shot of even making it to the relegation bracket.
It is truly terrifying stuff. Even Tom60229, I believe, has a chance of not being in playoffs despite his very strong start to the round robin here in Grandmasters. Obviously, a win against Frosty, I think, would guarantee him to get into that top 4 spot alongside the other guaranteed players in Blitzchung and Tyler, I believe, as well as Shaxi, I think, who's also in a very strong spot. We've got a good kind of quadfecta of the top 4 players in Division B.
Quadfecta, I've heard it all. Yeah,
I don't know.
It is also Frosty and Samuel Tsao, despite having the lowest amount of wins so far, do have twice as many games to play this weekend compared to Staz, for example. So there's a chance to equalize here. I get the feeling we're going to have some very complex tiebreaker situations, in which case the head-to-head will be very important, and Frosty would be feeling good if he ends up at the same score as Samuel Tsao, for example. But the bottom line is every single game from here on out is the highest stake, and we have